Our next speaker, our next speaker is Mr. Anand Prasad, a corporate and commercial lawyer with over 3 decades of experience representing both domestic and international clients across a wide spectrum of legal and commercial matters. He is a co-founder of Trillegal, one of the country's premier commercial law firms. His work spans complex transactions, cross-border engagements, and advisory roles within and outside India, making him a respected voice in the intersection of law, business, and policy. In conversation with his book, Unshackling the Elephant, we have Ms. Subhadra Banda. Can we have a huge round of applause, please? A leader in technology partnerships, where over the last 14 years, she has worked across various organizations like Meta, Boston Consulting Group, and Google. She has only been an entrepreneur and is currently board member for the Vedika Scholars Program for Women. Can we have a huge round of applause for both of them? I request both of you to take the conversation ahead.
Can you hear me?
Hello.
Okay, perfect. Forgive both of us. Both of us have a little bit of a cough today, all thanks to, I think, where we live. Anand, I think I was left with 3 figures, right, when I ended the book. We have 324 years before we can clear legal backlog. 76% of our prisoners are under trials, which means they haven't even been convicted of a crime, and we are somewhere around 67 when it comes to a ranking as a country in a rule of law index. Very, very big problem. For me, I think what was really fascinating was that the book spoke to all parts of my career, whether it's in the non-profit space, as someone who used to work with the government, or someone in the business space. And I also feel like it does both, right? It talks about both the tactical as well as the strategic. You've been through a glorious career, right? Anybody who is in the legal profession knows of the institutions you've built. You've built one of India's biggest professional law firms. You had a very interesting political stint, and now you're back with your second law firm, which Anand wrote this book, which Anand thought of writing this book. And tell us a little bit about both Anands.
So the book is in many ways about how do you transform our experience of living in this country at various levels. At the legal level, at the cultural level, at the social level, at every single level. How do you change that? So the first Anand that you mentioned is the one that is building a firm called Trillegal. And that experience got me into various spaces, primarily coming from business, but it also got me to look at international business. How did it happen elsewhere around the world? What role did technology play in other parts of the world? Why did things work in some parts of the world, but not in ours? So think of it like this: our legal system is adopted from the English. Why is it that it doesn't work so well here? Why does it work well in various other countries? Why does it work well in England? Why does it work well in the US? So those were sort of questions in my mind, and it drove me to saying that something needs to get done. I had a host of different things in my head in terms of what could make the switch. Those ideas are what drove me to step into politics. I decided, all right, enough money making for myself. I need to do some direct action, so direct country transformation. Now this resulted in me trying out a few things, but then ultimately decided to set up a political party along with a bunch of people of our own. The success of Trillegal had made me arrogant enough to believe that what I could do in the economic space, because as you would know, as somebody who studied law and has known law as well, that there's a glass ceiling. Not too many that don't come from a legal background can actually go through it. And Trillegal is the first organization of its kind that sort of broke that glass ceiling. So I was an army kid. I believed that I could actually do the same politically. For a couple of years, I ran that political party with many of the ideas that today find their mention in this book. The book is a little more sophisticated than those, but a lot of the core ideas were very similar. And then I fell with my face flat on the ground. So you win some and you lose some. And then decided with my tail between my legs, went back to the practice of law. And when I went back to the practice of law, which is the second firm, is when I thought that now what do I do? Am I going to become a money-making lawyer once again? Or do I need to do something about my desire to change a nation? And the desire to change the nation got me to sort of write this book. It is also what the book flags is, we normally think transformation is requiring something huge.
Yeah.
That's a huge enterprise and it will take a lot of effort. Actually, if you are intelligent enough and if you have the stomach for it, you can bring transformation with very little things. And the book essentially talks about the little things that you can do. No major transformation required, but very easy to change the lives, our experience of living in this nation. How can we be more empowered as citizens? How can we be wealthier as citizens? How can we be more equal as citizens? Going to the previous panel, how can women, and that is, let's say, 50% of the population, how can women be sort of looked at as genuine equals, not because you create a sense of artificial equality, but how does that equality come from inside? How are they comfortable with their sexuality? How does that translate to who you are as a woman? And therefore, what makes you more powerful? So those were the thoughts that got me to write this.
I think that's fascinating, right? And I think that's what I also really enjoyed about the first few chapters of the book, right? Which is, what you're saying is, for a very long time, the Ramban, or, the one thing that everybody talks about when it comes to reform, especially legal and judicial reform in this country, is to say, let's do something massive. Let's build a spaceship, let's get more judges in place. But I think your career also speaks to it, right? You've gone through the journey of seeing and implementing things, as a founder of a law firm. But I want to specifically also focus on the first few ideas that you talk about, right? And I thought was fascinating. One was a knowledge grid, where you say that, often it is almost ignorance or lack of access to quality legal research that results in, different kinds of judgments. Somebody sitting in Delhi should be able to do this as well as somebody sitting elsewhere, vice versa. What in this world that you describe, where we have great quality research present, you have a lot of inputs defined so that you're able to standardize the output. What is the role of a lawyer and a judge, right?
So let me first deal with the quality aspect, then I'll come to the lawyer and the judge. So what all lawyers know is that different judges are qualitatively different. Their levels of understanding, their levels of knowledge are very, very different, like any other human being. They are ultimately human beings. They function like human beings, so their understandings are different, the perspectives are different. As citizens, what you need is you require a great degree of standardization, because those are the guys that are interpreting and applying the law. And you want the outcome to be very similar regardless of who the judge is. What you do realize is qualitatively that is different. Now, most of us attribute that failure of the justice system to corruption. My book does not deal with corruption head on, because that's a separate approach. What it does, however, deal with, and which most of us do not identify as a huge problem for us in governance and in law dispensation, is we are poor quality professionals. So the quality of professionalism is lousy, to use a polite word. And therefore, what is it that you can do to change that? So how can you qualitatively make the lawyers better lawyers? How can you qualitatively make the judges better judges? How can you make, the same yardstick you can use, same basis you can use to say, how do you make bureaucrats better as bureaucrats? So all of that. So how do you change the nature of the state? And this is where I came with, this is partly where my international experience and how I connected the dots came along, is that how do you make mediocre people look like geniuses?
Right.
because they are inherently mediocre. How do you make them look like geniuses? That is actually the way BPOs operate. That is how in international law firms the know-how sort of systems operate, the templatized systems operate. And it was very simple to think in terms of if that same thing is replicated in the court system, is that from a district court level to a Supreme Court level judge, they can be not very different from a know-how perspective. So qualitatively they become much better. What that does, that improved quality results in the appeal process actually getting slowed down, because a poor quality judge makes you feel that I've been done in. He or she does not explain themselves properly, you feel the need to go up in appeal. That desire will go away, because if your position is clearly articulated in the judgment, then you're more willing to accept that. So it'll bring down the pressure, but qualitatively the judgment, the outcome for you will be better, the decision for you will be better. And people are more willing to accept high quality decisions, even if it does not work very well for themselves. So that was some of the thinking. It can be a much longer discussion of the issue, but I thought that might sort of work.
No, and you raise an important point, right? Like a large part of what our judicial system is dealing with is not a hard case. It's a plain vanilla case. It's a check bounce case. It truly doesn't require a great extent of legal research to do a creative argument there. In that circumstance, what do you feel like is the right kind of hard case, or a legal problem that a judge and a lawyer should be spending time on, right? Can you think of something in the recent?
So let's think in terms of how do legal services pan out. So when something is new, it's right off the block, some new kind of problem. It requires, and I would describe it like this, I've created this whole phrase, but it's come out of something that I learned at an international educational institution. So you will require to be somewhat of a rocket scientist to find out an answer for a new kind of problem. So highly complex, new problem, you require to be thinking out of the box to find a solution. In a country of 1.5 billion people, that problem will recur many times. You will, from being a problem solver in terms of inventing the wheel, the next level is, some people know how the wheel was invented, so they just actually manufacture the wheel, which is basically the experience of inventing the wheel. And I'm saying solution is the wheel over here. You take it to the next level. So you have a set of professionals that are experience oriented. And then it becomes slightly more commonplace. So you have the rocket scientist, then you have the experienced professional, and then you have the professional that is dealing with mass volume. So you have similar sort of issues that have come up, has been done many times, and you can do it quite easily. There are a bit of variation. And then the last one, you have the commoditization. So commoditization means now this problem has become so common and it has been addressed so many times that you can actually fill up a form and it's like a fill in the blanks and you can come up with the answer. For commoditization, you can actually mechanize the process. So there are a whole host of legal problems that today human judges deal with as if they are doing rocket science. Now, commoditization can be done by lesser professionals that cost much lesser, and a huge volume of professionals can be deployed to do it. So there are a set of legal problems that are in that nature. Then there is the mass kind of bunch, which is not yet commoditized, heading in that direction. So I'll give you examples of these as well. Again, you don't require a highly sophisticated person to do this. You require somebody who sort of has some basic training in law to be able to do it.
Yeah.
The commoditized one, you don't even need a lawyer to do it. The experienced one has to have real experience. The geniuses can deploy themselves to new problems. Now, let's say that there are a whole host of cases, check bouncing, landlord-tenant. Many of them can be, by and large, put into the last two brackets. That's where technology can get deployed. You can reduce the burden on the court system, deploy technology, and you allow for the human beings to operate in a more sophisticated space. You are supposed to be professional. Low-hanging fruit is not what you should be seeking. Let the machines do that. You do the thing that is harder to do. And therefore, leave the harder problem-solving thing to the human beings, the lawyers, the judges, they are then backed with that know-how system and therefore can deliver a lot better. And then you require some complete geniuses to deliver complete rocket science. So rockets are not made by everybody.
And in fact, what we are seeing is that, the Supreme Court, High Courts are actually dealing with the commoditized levels of problems, right? A disproportionate chunk of their time is going not in solving for, a new hard legal problem, right? Defining a freedom is going in this. I'm actually going to change tack a little bit, and maybe this is a little bit selfish because at some point in time I used to be an entrepreneur, so I'm maybe looking for my next idea, and I'll use Anand to do it, right? For me, actually, it feels like the system is ripe for disruption. Yes, a lot of it is, the onus of like the legislative bodies to do this, but I feel like there is a role for the private sector here. If there's an entrepreneur sitting in the audience or someone who's aspiring to be one, what would you say are some of the threads they should be picking up on? Like,
the legal system, I would believe that there's an unbelievable opportunity for the tech entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs of various kinds. Think of it also like this, is that we are an ineffective system, legal system. So what happens is the people that come to an ineffective system is very less. If the system becomes more effective, the volume of people going to the system is much more. Now please in this audience tell me if there is anybody that has not encountered a problem in life which you could have gone to court but you decided against going to court. Is there anybody who's decided not, you have never had a problem? So have you on every occasion gone to court? So that's exactly what I'm saying, is that there are times, very often you decide not to go to court is because you do not believe that the court system will deliver to you timely, quickly enough, inexpensive enough. But if the system becomes very effective, you will actually take many of those problems to court. And that is one reality that when you look at this problem is you're going to keep in mind is that the volume will go up. So the marketplace will get developed. Now, there are a host of things that are suggested in the first chapter, which is technology, and that is where a lot of the entrepreneurship can come in. So I talk in terms of online courts, which means that you can have television screens in the millions that can be put together. You have connectivity that can be served. Again, huge opportunity in terms of how does the connectivity work. You have the hard infrastructure that entrepreneurs can supply to this. It's not, again, these are not rocket science things. These can be done very much within India. So huge entrepreneurship that is possible. And then you have the know-how grid that I'm talking about. Now government, while the government will give the money for it, it has to buy from somewhere. The person who sells it to government or to state is going to be the entrepreneur that will make money out of this opportunity. So that is where the space is for entrepreneurship. Then there is, of course, how do you use tech? How do you use software? How do you use AI? Another set of entrepreneurship.
Yeah, I feel like some of the ideas just really made me think about the system in a new light, right? I think some of the things you mentioned were like a court management system that times you so that both counsels, opposing as well as, both counsels are able to present their arguments in the same amount of time. There's uniformity. You spoke about translation, which I think is a very easy problem for tech to solve. And these are real problems. I think a lot of time goes in being able to solve these problems. Talking about business and entrepreneurship, I actually wanted to come to a part that's fairly close to my heart. Because, and you mentioned it, right? You mentioned this anecdote about a client just saying, let me sign a blank piece of paper. Because at this point in time, contracts are like Bollywood scripts. They're great. They're heavily, edited. Lots of work goes into it. But at the end of the day, it remains, it's something that you cannot enforce in reality. And I feel like in your career, this is probably the thing that you've seen the most. You advise on market entry for very big technology companies to enter India. How do they think about India? A country where you cannot enforce a contract very easily.
So when there are international clients looking to invest in India, you don't want to scare them away and make them run away. So you also want clients. So what you tell them is you tell them the truth. Except it is like Yudhishthira's Ashwatthama is dead, kind of way. So what you tell them is, you have a great legal system, very true. You look at the textbooks, it's a great legal system. It does deliver. It takes a little while to deliver, but it does deliver. And what you therefore say is, our legal system is very much like the English legal system or the American legal system. With some cultural variations, it works exactly like that. So if you understand your country in England or in the US well, then you know, instinctively you know how India works. Then you say there are the cultural nuances to it, and therefore you will need to sort of understand the culture. You therefore allow for that investment to come in. You're not being dishonest when you say all of this. And then it is the job of the lawyers to try and make it work through. Very soon, they realize that there is a lot of bureaucratic hassle. You do tell them at that time that, look, we are a slower country, we are a developing country, so you will have hassle. There will be pain points where you feel that the system is not moving fast enough. So it's something that you say, but they also look at a 1.5 billion people opportunity, and greed does the rest. You allow for greed to flow in them, and then they sort of do what is needed to be done. So that is how you sort of make it work. But the biggest problem in their head, and for many of them, is the issue of corruption. And it is not corruption as a moral issue, because remember, for business, corruption is another cost. They have no morality around corruption. So, but the problem for them is, in lots of parts of Europe, in the UK, in the US, there is foreign anti-corruption practices. There's a law. And therefore, their senior management in their home countries will go to jail if there's evidence of corruption here. Otherwise, they have to report it. So they have to do annual audits and do this reporting. So it's a huge hassle. How do we do business in this country if we have got to be clean like that? All entrepreneurs find a way to trick their way around the laws and the system. So they end up doing that, exactly that. But that is one of the greatest challenges that sort of hold people back. That is the greatest challenges in international boardrooms that say, this is not a country that we want to go to. What is very helpful is today, from our perspective, is the US president is very helpful for our economy. The way China behaves is helpful for our economy. So there is going to be, regardless of their trepidations with India, investment will come into India.
I feel like being able to do some of the things that you're saying in the book will only make it easier for investment to come in, right? And actually, the other thing that you do talk about is just juxtaposing this, right? Where you have big companies entering India, wanting to do business. They see the India opportunity, the India affluent. And at the same time, you see smaller businesses, and India is a country of MSMEs, right? And I'll take an example. I know someone who runs a home kitchen. The amount of compliance, amount of licensing from the SSAI, FSAI that they have to go through is disproportionate to the income that they're making. You point this out in your book. You talk about, Dhobiwala, who, if he had to get the licenses he has to get, will charge you like 200 rupees to iron your shirt. So where is the balance that we have to strike, right? We have to find a way to enforce these contracts, but we also remove the burden on these small businesses.
So my book is principally, I'm a commercial lawyer. So it's written in a commercial context, but commerce also takes into account how does gender equality work, how does fairness work, how does equality work, all of those things. So that makes for a better business environment. How does freedom work? But the book is principally, when it thinks of business, is thinking micro businesses. I am thinking, how can you set up a legal system where somebody who sets up a pakoda wala thela can, within a period of 5 years, have 10 pakoda thelas? How that person can then expand his business in a period of 10 years to actually have shops and restaurants? How in 15 years he can do an IPO, he or she can do an IPO. It is what does the law need to do, how does it need to change to enable the life of the smallest business person to do his business easily. Once you are able to do that, big business will sort itself out. Big business has enough money to pay lawyers, accountants, and get their job done. All right, they have a hassle, but no law stands in the way of big business. I mean, they manage to get what is. Sometimes they run into problems, but It is the small guy. How many of us know a pan wala is set up 20 pan shops? How many of us know a pakoda wala? I mean, the one pakoda wala that we know has been there for the last 20 years. We may have moved up from eating pakodas to going to McDonald's or even better institutions than that. But that poor fellow is just doing one. The nature of our laws, the nature of how we have set up our nation is we have set up a regulatory system looking at Western standards, not looked at our reality in India, not looked at the economic reality of India. We have imposed a regulatory framework that requires high level of compliance, high level of looking at something, and then you force people into illegality, and illegality forces them to remain small. And that is the huge problem that India has. When I hear government speak, they're all talking about big business. Yeah. Nobody's talking about the small pakoda wala. Other than the Prime Minister giving an example of small pakoda wala, nobody does anything for him. Nobody thinks for him. And that is what our nation state needs to change. We need to think of the chota entrepreneur. That poor person thinks that I'm doing an honest job. He doesn't believe that they are doing illegality. But on day one, as you're saying, your friend who runs the kitchen, the cost of compliance is very high. Yeah. And therefore, you will bend, if you want to be sensitive to cost that the market is willing to bear, you will need to bring down your cost of compliance, which means you're doing illegality. So you actually intended to be a legally functional entrepreneur. On day one, you have made yourself illegal because that is the way the system is. And it says that all around the world, we are the best legal framework in the world. And this is what works in the rest of the world. This is what should work in India. Never mind your paying potential. So look at who we are, look at our paying potential, look at our economic basis, frame regulations meant for us, not for the guy that lives in a developed country.
And that's what you're talking about when you talk about like almost Ram Raja, right? Where you're saying India requires a homegrown legal system.
Yes.
That speaks to its realities, both economic, political, and social. And I think one example really that defines this for me is that, when I went through law school, I remember ignorance is no excuse, right? Is a large part of, how we deal with this legal system. But in a country where literacy is different, where the understanding and access to a lawyer is different, it's high time for us to rethink a lot of this. What would you think is like the first few things that should go, in terms of laws, right? What would you think is one thing that India should have a homegrown version of and does not have?
So that's a long laundry list. But the book flags a bunch of them in terms of what do you mean by Indianized law? Indianized law doesn't mean, and you have a lot of people talking in terms of you need a dharmic constitution, and you need dharmic laws. I mean, I challenge anybody to explain to me what is dharma. And there are multiple interpretations of what is dharma. So this whole talk about dharmic is bogus. Right. It is done by people who are half-baked, who don't understand what dharma is. And the truth of dharma is that it is so difficult to pin down that even in the ancient texts, even Krishna was struggling with it. So everybody struggles with what is dharma. And therefore, how do you therefore in a modern sense articulate something like that into written text? You cannot. So it's a thing that the Indian way is more sense. What is it that feels right? What is it that doesn't feel right? What feels right in certain circumstances might be different. So for Ajmal Kasab to be put through a trial for 4 years, for most of us Indians, it doesn't make sense. I mean, the guy was caught red-handed. What are you doing with trying him for 4 years?
Video footage.
And then he has got right of appeal, this, that, and the other. I mean, it is bogus. Is that, and so therefore, what are we doing? We are imitating the white guy when we do that. So lots of my peers will say, no, how can you convict somebody without a trial, or how can you put somebody to death without a trial? I mean, it's an open and shut. Why do I need to be a slave to process? I need to be focused on outcome, and that is the Indian way, and that is principally what I will say should change in our legal system. We should be outcome focused. We should follow the Indian way, not the process way, which is more Western style.
There's a lot to get through in this book, and you must read it. I think this chapter, I think, was for me the one I had some disagreements with, but that's what I like about this book, right? That Anand is encouraging a conversation. I want to move to redefining boundaries because it strikes on three very important and fun topics. One is you clearly call out that sovereign immunity, letting government officials get away without prosecution, except for when it's corruption, actually just breeds incompetence, right? Do you think, and a lot of people make this argument, and I wanted your take on it, which is to say if we reach a situation where we're holding government officials accountable, there will be a chilling effect on government officials taking decisions. What are your thoughts on that?
Okay, so let me take a step back and describe to everybody what is sovereign immunity, because I think most of us don't understand it. So sovereign immunity is the king can do no wrong. This is an English approach, it's biblical in nature. The king can do no wrong, and therefore the servants of the king can do no wrong. As long as I act with the best intent, even if my decision is wrong and if it is fatal to many people, I cannot be prosecuted. And that is the whole premise. This was brought into India by the English. It did not exist before the English. It did not exist at the time of Turkic rule, at the time of Mughal rule, at the time of Hindu rule. It did not exist in India. It is an English imperial imposition. We have become brown slaves. I mean, we've become sort of coconuts. We are brown on the outside, white in the inside. And therefore, what the English taught us is now gospel truth. I mean, how can it be very different? I mean, the previous panel was discussing this whole approach to sex was exactly that. It's a Victorian idea of sex. The reactions were sort of coming from the Victorian mindset in many ways. And therefore, coming to sovereign immunity, if in our system, if Dasharatha shot somebody by mistake, he had to pay the consequences. He could not say कि श्रवण कुमार को मैंने गलती से मार दिया. This is our ethos. तुमने जो किया है उसका तुमको भरना पड़ेगा. भले तुम्हारा जो भी mindset रहा हो. Same thing happens with Pandu. It is true. It's replete. And if we say that no, Muslim rule was different, when Noor Jahan killed somebody by mistake, Jahangir has to pay large amounts of money to make sure his wife is not killed in retribution. There is no sovereign immunity. We have now gotten sovereign immunity, and so therefore what do our bureaucrats say? And I'm saying sovereign immunity including for the judges. So in the book it is written more for the judges. That तुम frivolously adjourn कर देते हो, तारीख पे तारीख करवा देते हो, लोगों को नचा देते हो. तुम्हारा काम है सर्विस डिलीवर करना. Adjournment कोई बहाना ढूंढ के, every intelligent person can find a reason not to do something. तो not to do is much better than doing something and finding that you're wrong. तो मैं adjourn ही कर देता हूँ. There has to be a cost for this frivolous behavior. And what I'm saying is you today derive protection from the idea of sovereign immunity. Now, even our government, so you find all governments will say, we will protect the bureaucrats so that they should take decisions fearlessly. Let me ask you a question. None of us enjoy sovereign immunity. I'm assuming nobody over here works for government. None of us. Does it prevent us from doing decisions? If we take wrong decisions, do we have adverse outcome? Do we deal with the adverse outcome?
Absolutely.
If we can live on these standards, so can those buggers. So you need to get rid of the idea of sovereign immunity. It has been eroded. So I talk about the English, but it's been eroded in England. It's also been eroded in the US. So if you watch US television series closely, you will find very often criminals will threaten the investigating officer, the cops, that I'm going to sue the police department. I'm going to sue you personally.
For wrongful
It is
prosecution.
unheard of in India. If the enforcement directorate arrests somebody over here with very frivolous stuff, you cannot prosecute them. With impunity, the state can arrest people. There is no consequence for the arrestor. He need not have a case. He can just fabricate something. And that erodes, in many ways, individual liberty. It erodes our freedom to allow people to be that. And remember, it is an imperial idea that we have internalized and made ours. We are now as if we are married to it. We all agree that bureaucrats need protection. We all agree that judges need protection. I'm saying challenge that. Why do they need protection? It's an English idea. It did not exist before the English.
Absolutely. One, I wanted to check if we'll be doing an audience section. Do let us know. But I'll continue because I have a gazillion questions. So I'll keep you entertained. I think the other interesting one has been your take on, gun licensing and law, right? I think what you call out is the usual disagreement with the right to bear arms is the one that you see in the US, which is to say that it has led to gun shootings, suicides, right? And what you call out is it's not the gun that's killing the person, people kill people. But somehow the US is getting it wrong. So where is the balance to be struck? Like, how do we get this right?
So you guys should read the book. So I actually am an advocate for saying, get rid of gun licensing. Let there be free availability of guns. And everybody sort of jumps at the idea. So all of us are urban people are very hassled by this idea. So read the book. You may disagree with me. Read the book. But here are the few points that I'll make at this stage. Is that one, we don't realize that lot of the Western world has easy gun ownership laws. It's not only in the US, it's in the UK, it's in Europe. In Japan, you can carry weapons. In most parts of the world, you can carry weapons. Even in India, there are communities that can carry weapons. The Kurgis and the Sikhs. Sikhs are entitled to carry long swords. The Kurgis are allowed actually to have weapons. One, you don't see Kurgis shooting people randomly. It's a fact. You don't see English people shooting people randomly. You see some mad guys in the US, and the US, remember, if 2 people die, it makes headlines, newspaper headlines. Over here, if 200 people die, nobody notices it. You look at the people that die in India on account of gun violence, where the guns are in the hands of criminals, and the victims almost are incapable of defending themselves, and the state is nowhere in place to defend those. Forget about defend. Post-violence justice delivery, completely defunct. That is who we are, that is where we are. Now let's think in terms of the US. In the US, is it going bad, as you said? In the US, what do? You go to Walmart, which is like a Reliance store or any of these stores. You have automatic weapons on sale. You have rocket-propelled launchers on sale over there. That is a problem area. You have got weapons of mass killing available to buy as if you can buy a toy gun. There is almost no protest in the US for carrying small arms. The lobby against gun violence is about being able to buy these weapons of mass killing at a Walmart without any check or balance. In most parts of the world, as I said, that hunting weapons are allowed, weapons for self-defense are allowed. Now imagine if we in India were to do that. See, our truth is that today none of us encounters, if we have not encountered anything untoward, you are very happy. The first time some goon slaps you or stabs you or something, you'll figure out how effective the justice system is. The jurisprudential idea, which is the legal idea for removing gun control, is that you have a God-given right to commit violence. That violence you surrender to the state because the state will deliver violence to protect you. My question jurisprudentially as a lawyer is the state is unable to protect me, unable to deliver post-violence justice. Should this right to carry the weapon come back to me as an individual? And that is essentially where I am coming from. The last bit that I will say, it is again an English law that dismantled the entire gun culture in India. So we used to be a country with our guns and weapons and all kinds of things. We were a golden civilization in that period. There were killings that were happening at various places, but we were, if you think, do you think post-English rule was better or pre-English rule was better? And for most of us, we would think that pre-English rule was better because imperialism did us in. And therefore, how did imperialism decide to control India? You decided to, so the Indians were, it's now very post-socialism and post-Gandhian age, it's very nice to say Indians were very non-violent, we were peace-loving people, etc. But we were a highly violent society. We were very happy to commit violence and protect ourselves. Have you noticed that none of the Hindu gods lack weapons? They all have weapons in their hands. That is who we are. We have no fear of violence because one thing you remember, we don't live one life, we live multiple lives. I'll die now, I'll be born again. I was born earlier, I'll be born multiple times. And therefore, our fear of death is not as abject as it is elsewhere. What the English did, because they needed to control this country, they decided to take away our weapons, they decided to take away our guns, and because we are the coconuts as we are the sort of the brown sahibs, we decided कि जो अंग्रेज़ों ने किया वही सही है, हमको तो वो continue करते रहना चाहिए, like many other things that we are continuing अंग्रेज़ों का, and therefore you continue not to have the right to defend yourselves in a violent fashion. For the rest, please read my book. I've hopefully tried and write it as simple a way as I could.
I think when I asked about which version of Anand wrote the book and then thought of the book, the good news is all versions of Anand are bold, are provocative and argue in a very logical manner. So thank you for a lovely conversation. I know we have some questions.
We will be having questions, and please be quick and short. Can we have the mic?
Hi sir, good afternoon. Do you think a retributive system is better than a reformative system?
See, this is who we are as a people. If the laws must reflect the will of the people and not the will of the English. As Indians, we truly believe in retribution. Reform can happen simultaneously, but not by emasculating ourselves of the right to retribute.
All right, thank you.
He's also doing his job. The judge is doing his job, and I'm doing mine. So when I'm in court, why do I have to address somebody as my lord? Why does he become my lord?
So good point. Excellent. I make a point. I make arguments against my lord in the book. But here's one reality. There are bar resolutions. There have been various decisions. Various judges have said, "Don't call me my lord." But one is my lord is a term that works more in the High Court and the Supreme Court. The lower courts is your honor. Or janab or whatever. It depends on which state you are in and what vernacular language you are dealing with. Now, my lord is something that lawyers find it very difficult to give up, because remember one thing, these judges very often are some of the hardest working individuals in this country. They are grossly underpaid. So you have got grossly underpaid, intelligent people put under extreme pressure, working hard, and they have a sense for, yaar kuch to de do mujhe, some respect. Now let me complete it. Some respect. The lawyers understand this need. Because the lawyers understand this need, the lawyers turn around and say, now remember that the judges have also a lot of discretion. They can give an injunction, not give an injunction, give an order in your favor, not give it. So you will do whatever you can to be pleasant to the judge. One of the things is my lord. And therefore you find, despite judges telling lawyers that don't address me as my lord, the system continues. It is a vestige of English rule. And we tend to continue. I mean, look at we wear black coats and black gowns in 44 degrees summer. I mean, that is how badly we can be.
Any more questions? Can we have one of the volunteer to be here and pass the mic?
गुड आफ्टरनून सर, मेरा एक सवाल है कि हम अक्सर कहते हैं कि कानून के हाथ बहुत लंबे होते हैं, तो जब हमें ये सुनने को मिलता है कि कुछ केसेस ऐसे होते हैं कि जो इंसान जो है पूरी उम्र, वो जवानी से लेके बुढ़ापे तक उसका जो है उस केसों में समय बीत जाता है, इवन कईयों की डेथ भी हो जाती है, तो ये एक पैराडॉक्स है कि हम कह रहे हैं कि कानून के हाथ लंबे होते हैं, तो वो लंबे हाथ जो हैं वो उस परिस्थिति को क्यों नहीं पकड़ पाते हैं कि वो वास्तविक स्थिति क्या थी कि जो उसको न्याय नहीं मिल पाया.
एक तो कानून के हाथ लंबे जरूर होते हैं, लेकिन कमज़ोर के लिए होते हैं लंबे। जो ताकतवर होता है उसके लिए उतने लंबे नहीं होते, उसके लिए वो ताकतवर हाथों को छोटा कर देता है। लेकिन आपका आंसर देने के लिए मैंने किताब लिखा हुआ है कि अगर सरकार इस टाइप के रिफॉर्म को लाएगी तो वो बड़े टाइमली तरीके से जस्टिस डिलीवरी होगा। जो आज के दिन आपको लगता है कि 4 साल लगेंगे, 5 साल लगेंगे इस केस में, मेरा टारगेट है अगर ये वाले रिफॉर्म अगर आप करोगे तो आपका जजमेंट, जो फर्स्ट ट्रायल कोर्ट वाला जजमेंट है, 4-5 साल के जगह 6 से 12 हफ्तों के अंदर होना चाहिए।
हम विकसित भारत की बात करते हैं कि हमारा देश जो है इतना हर देश में हर चीज़ में आगे बढ़ रहा है। हम अपने देश को जो है चांद तक ले गए, कहाँ तक ले गए, मंगल तक ले गए। लेकिन अगर न्याय व्यवस्था की बात आती है तो क्या हम उसमें इतने खुद को सरकार जो है कहने में इतनी सक्षम है? क्या वो दावे से कह सकती है कि हमने न्याय व्यवस्था को भी इतना सुदृढ़ कर दिया है?
मेरा ये ख्याल है, मेरा ये पर्सपेक्टिव है कि अगर आप न्याय व्यवस्था को ठीक नहीं करोगे तो विकसित भारत का इंटरप्रिटेशन अलग रहेगा। 2047 में विकसित भारत का मतलब ये होगा कि कुछ लोग बहुत ताकतवर और अमीर हो जाएंगे, बाकी लोग वहीं गंद में पड़े रहेंगे। अगर हमें ट्रूली विकसित भारत करना है तो हमें ये जो अंग्रेजी आर्किटेक्चर है, सिर्फ नाम के वास्ते हमें नहीं चेंज करना है कि कुछ छोटे मोटे ट्वीक कर दिया, उसको बोल दिया हमने लीगल रिफॉर्म कर दिया, इंडियनाइज कर दिया और कुछ भी नहीं हुआ। वहाँ पे आज तक कोई चेंज नहीं हो रहा है, बड़े सारे रिफॉर्म कर रही है, कुछ चीज़ें काम कर रही हैं, मैं ये नहीं कह रहा हूँ कि बिल्कुल नहीं, लेकिन अगर आप एक टोटली इफेक्टिव सिस्टम जो लोगों के समझ में आए, आप ये मत सोचो कि अंग्रेज के समझ में आएगा कि नहीं, आप ये सोचो कि मेरे लोगों के समझ में आएगा कि नहीं। अगर हमारे लोगों के समझ में आना शुरू हो जाएगा हमारा कानून और वो स्पीड के तरफ हम ध्यान देंगे, तब जाके हमारा देश विकसित होगा। वरना विकसित तो मतलब बोलने के लिए तो हम सोने की चिड़िया हैं
जी,
तो वो फिर वो हिस्ट्री के बारे में आप बात करते रहो, फ्यूचर के बारे में कभी होगा नहीं। वो तो एज ए पॉलिटिकल स्लोगन बना रहेगा, लेकिन वो पॉलिटिकल स्लोगन आपके लिए कभी रियलिटी बनेगी नहीं जब तक आप एक लीगल फ्रेमवर्क इस टाइप का नहीं करोगे जो सिस्टम ऑटोमेटिकली फेयरनेस और जस्टिस डिलीवर करे लोगों को।
क्योंकि मेरा एक छोटा सा, मैं बहुत संक्षिप्त में बताना चाहूँगी कि हमारी जो मेरी माताजी की जो उनका जो पैतृक संपत्ति थी, उसमें सभी भाई बहनों का किसी तरह से घालमेल करके मेरे सगे मामा जी ने जो है वो प्रॉपर्टी अपने नाम करवा ली। तो उस चीज़ का मुझे अब तक वो बड़ा मलाल रहता है कि मेरी माँ, उन्होंने कुछ नहीं लिया उस संपत्ति से, लेकिन उनको बदले में कोर्ट से सम्मान जो है उनको मिले।
तो इसमें ये होगा कि आपके मामा जी थोड़े ज़्यादा पावरफुल रहे होंगे, आपकी माता जी थोड़े कमज़ोर रही होंगी। जो मैं कह रहा था कि कमज़ोरों के लिए कानून अलग तरीके से काम करता है। लेकिन अगर आप इस टाइप के लीगल रिफॉर्म जो मैं किताबों में लिख रहा हूँ, अगर वैसे अगर सरकार ले आए तो इस टाइप की एनॉमली खत्म हो जाएगी।
लेकिन
ये फिर हम सिर्फ हिस्ट्री की किताबों में पढ़ेंगे, ये हमारी प्रेजेंट रियलिटी नहीं होगी। और जो हो चुका उसके बारे में मैं नहीं बोल रहा हूँ, जो हम कर सकते हैं एज ए देश, उसके बारे में बात कर रहा हूँ इस किताब में।
जी जी, धन्यवाद सर, बहुत बहुत।
Yes, last question, and please be quick and short. Any?
Hi, nice to hear about what you've written, Anand. I'm also a lawyer from the same fraternity, so I really appreciate it. My question is, you have any imagined next steps, or what do you hope for the system to? How do you hope the system or the judiciary or the government to respond to your book?
So I'm hoping, one, that government picks up. The first couple of chapters has got reform by use of technology in the justice delivery system, and it's got business law changes, non-political, easy to implement, easy to understand, non-controversial. It will radically change the way our nation works. So if you talk in terms of Viksit Bharat, first 2 chapters, you will be close to Viksit Bharat. And we don't need to wait till 2047. It will happen in our lifetimes. 2047, I'll be dead. So I like to see Viksit Bharat when I'm still alive. The other bits, if you look at my book, it also describes in the sort of epilogue chapter, is the experience of common people once these reforms are implemented on various scores. and it tells you how things work faster. So to the lady's question, there are things like that that the sort of the end conclusion part deals with in the book. And it will give you a sense for how things will transform if ideas like this come into effect. It's also written in a sort of easy layperson style. It's not written for lawyers. It's not written for jurists. It is written for common people. I'm hoping to sort of have the book translated and then put out so that various kinds of Indians can read this. It demystifies what the legal system is for the common people. Today, common people understand that the laws are not working, the system is not working. कुछ change होना चाहिए. क्या change होना चाहिए किसी को मालूम नहीं है. So it is demystifying that in easy to understand ways, hopefully. Easy to understand ways, and therefore there will be over a period of time enough public sentiment for governments or elected bodies to react to it, to actually put in place such change. And that's the purpose of the book. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Anand and Ms. Subhadra, for sharing your insights with us today. Now, may I request Ms. Bharti Bhargav and Ms. Shreya Gupta to kindly join us on stage and present a memento as a small gesture of our appreciation.
Thank you, sir.